Hello, good afternoon to all of you. I hope all of you are doing well. So in today's class, we are going to discuss about overloading binary operators. So binary operators can be overloaded either using a friend function or a member function. So in the previous class, we have learned that whenever we are trying to overload a binary operator, if it's done using a member function, what we need to do is we need to provide one argument, and if it's done using a friend function, what we need to do is we need to provide two arguments. So this is very much important for you to remember. Okay, so here what we're trying to do is we are trying to overload binary operator with the help of a member function. So whenever we are trying to overload a binary operator with the help of a member function, what we need to do is we need to provide one argument, right? So here what I have is I have a class complex and I have two members, the real part and the imaginary part, placed in the private section of the class, right? Okay, then I have a constructor here, okay, by the same name. So say here it's a function by the same name, so it's a constructor. So here again what I have is I have another constructor. Now this is a default constructor and this is a parameterized constructor here. Then I have a operator function plus that is capable of accepting one argument and is capable of returning a variable of type complex, right? And I have a function display. Now just see, this is the way how I have declared my class. I have two private members, real and imaginary part, and then I have the functions, okay, where which is placed in the public section of the class. We have the constructors that are capable of initializing the values to the members of the class, right? Again, and then I have an operator function plus that is capable of taking in a parameter of type complex, and it's capable of returning a parameter of type complex, and I have function display. Now what I have is I have defined the function operator plus. So here what I've done is I passed a parameter C, right? Object of class C, class complex, right? So C is an object of class complex. So here this is the way of defining the function outside the class. You need to specify the return type, the class name, and the function name. So here it's operator function, and then I'm passing a parameter here. So now what I've done is I've declared a temporary parameter. So temporary parameter temp is of type complex. So temp.real will be real plus c.real, and temp.imaginary will be imaginary plus c.imaginary. So here whenever a new object will be declared, so it will be the sum of the real and the imaginary part. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm returning temp now, right? So since the return type of operator function is complex, so it is returning temp. So now this is the way how this particular function works. So first the constructor will be called, the value of the real and the imaginary will be initialized, and then it will be added with the real and the imaginary of the object C, and the sum will be returned. So here again I have display function here that will display the content, display the value of the object in the real plus imaginary format. So now what I have is I have three variables here. You see C1, C2, and C3. Okay, C1, C2, and C3, these are objects of type complex, right? So now here what I've done is I've called the constructor, but here what I've made is I've made an explicit call to the constructor. So in the previous example, whatever we discussed till now using constructor, we had made an implicit call. Now here what I've done is I've made an explicit call. Here C1, C2, C3. So C1 is initialized with so here I made a explicit call to the constructor. So it will initialize imaginary and real and imaginary part with 1 and 2. Likewise, it will initialize real and imaginary part with 3 and 4, and then it will add up C1 and C2, and it will initialize it in C3. So here just see what we have made is we have made a function called to the operator function. So it's a binary plus. So what it's capable of doing is it's capable of adding up two contents of two complex numbers, right? So this is the way how it actually works. So here it will display the contents of C1, C2, and C3. Now, this is a very simple program, but it has a very important significance to it, right? So we have constructors in it, we have overloaded operators in it, we have we have operators that keep on taking parameters. So just see, this is a very important program that you need to execute, right? So again, what I'll do is I'll repeat it. So here what we have is we have a class complex. We have two members that are placed in the private section. We have the constructors. One is the default constructor, the other one is parameterized constructor, and then we have a operator function that takes in a variable of type complex and returns a variable of type complex. Then I have a display function that is capable of displaying the content of the object. So the operator function is defined as operator function that's capable of adding up two numbers adding up two complex numbers, and it's capable of returning the sum. So here I'm returning a variable of type complex, right? And display is capable of displaying the result in the a plus ib format. Now what I've done is I've declared three objects, so c1, c2, and c3. So the constructors are called here. Here what we have done is instead of implicit call, we have made an explicit call. So explicit call is done in this particular manner. So c1 whenever c1 equals to complex 1 comma 2 will be executed. So real and imaginary of c1 will be initialized with 1 and 2 respectively. When c2 is equals to complex 3 comma 4 is executed, real and imaginary part of c2 will be initialized with 3 and 4 respectively, right? Again, and then c3 is equals to c1 plus c2. So here what we have done is we have made a call to the operator function plus. So it's capable of adding up the contents of c1 and c2, and it's capable of placing the content in c3. So then what I've done is I've displayed the contents of c1, c2, and c3. Now likewise here what we can do is we can overload binary function or binary operators with the help of friend function. So whenever we are overloading binary operators with the help of friend function, as we have already learned, we need to provide two parameters, right? So here just see I've made a small adjustment in the same program. So here we have two private members. We have a default constructor and a parameterized constructor here, and then we have an operator function that takes in two parameters. So it takes in two objects of type complex. It returns an object of type complex, and what I have is I have a display function here. So now I'm defining the function. So since it's a friend function, I need not specify the class name or neither the scope resolution operator. So complex a and b. So I have taken complex temp. So temp is equals to temp dot real is equals to a dot real plus b dot real. Temp dot imaginary equals to a dot imaginary plus b dot imaginary, and what I'm doing is I'm returning temp here. Now again, I have a function that's capable of displaying the result in a plus ib format. So now just see here, again I have three objects, c1, c2, and c3. So I made an explicit call to the constructor where 10 and 20 will be initialized real and imaginary part of c1, 30 and 40 will be initialized to real and imaginary part of c2, and then I made a function call to the operator function that is capable of adding the content of c1 and c2, and it's capable of placing it in c3, and I've displayed the result of c1, c2, and c3. So this is the way how what we can overload an operator using a member function and a friend function. So in today's class, what we learned about is we have learned about overloading binary operator using a member function. So whenever you're overloading a binary operator using a member function, you need to provide one argument explicitly, and we have learned about overloading binary operator with the help of friend function. So whenever you're overloading binary operator with the help of friend function, you need to provide two operands explicitly, right? Against two arguments explicitly. So that's what we've learned, and we have tried to understand it with the help of an example. Now let us move on to the next important aspect that's called as function overloading. Now function overloading is defined as the process of having two or more functions with the same name, but it differs in the parameters, and it's capable of performing or exhibiting different behavior, right? Okay, so in case of a function overloading, what we have is we have multiple existence of functions with the same name but with different parameters and capable of performing different operations. So in function overloading, the function is redefined by using either different types of arguments or different number of arguments, right? It is only through through these differences compiler can differentiate between different functions. So this is very much important. So whenever we are trying to overload overload functions, we need to ensure that the differences can be prominently made by the compiler in terms of the number of arguments and the type of the arguments. Okay. Now the advantage of function overloading is that it increases the readability of the program because you don't need to use the different names for different functions. So this is implicitly understood. So these are the characteristics of function overloading. So it's the process of having multiple instances of same function with different parameters or different types of parameters, a different number of parameters and different types of parameters. It's a process of redefining the same function. The compiler differentiates between different function call with the help of the type and the number of parameters, right? Again, so it enhances the readability of the program because we are using the same function. Now just see function overloading. So here what I have a class called as sum. Okay, so in the public section what I have a function that is called as add, that's capable of adding two numbers. Likewise, I have a function that is called as add, that's capable of adding three numbers. And I can have a function that is called as add, it's capable of adding four numbers as well. Okay, right? So you can have multiple instances of add with multiple types of data provided to it. So now to see here, I'm calling so val is a variable of type sum, where sum is a class, right? So val is an object. So val dot add 10 comma 20. So whenever I call this function, what happens is that this version of the function is being called that add two numbers. Whenever I call val dot add 12 20 30, it will call this version of this particular function. So this is the way how it actually works. So different instances or different the different calls are being differentiated based on the number of parameters and the type of parameters, right? So here what I have is another example of a function overloading. So here what we have is we have a function that's capable of multiplying two numbers, okay, defined in different manners, right? Okay, so here you see I have multiply 6 and 7, so it will call function that's capable of taking up two integer values a and b, right? Okay, and here it is multiply 0.2 comma 3, so it will call this particular instance of the function. Now just see here what we need to remember is that what we have is we have 0.2 comma 3, right? So it's a floating point constant. So here I could have placed float instead of double, but as I've previously said as well, in C++ we have a problem that is called as type conversion, where the floating point constants are automatically converted into double. Okay. Now, so till now what we have learned about is we have learned about overloading binary operators, and we've learned about function overloading in brief. So let us recall what we've learned into this class, right? Again, so we have learned about overloading binary operators. We have learned about how to overload binary operators using member function. We have learned about how to overload binary operator using friend function. We have learned about how many arguments are to be placed whenever a operator function is overloaded using member function, or it's overloaded using friend function. And then we have taken up very simple examples in order to understand that. And then we have moved on to function overloading. We have learned about what is function overloading. We have learned about function overloading with the help of an example, right? Again, and we have learned about how the compiler differentiates between different function calls. So in the next class, we will be learning about function overloading and the associated ambiguities. Thank you very much.